Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Norma Juarez. I am a proud alumna and a staff member in UNC's Alumni Relations Office. Thank you all for joining us today for the Alumni Career Panel, Understanding Your Worth, featuring alumni in human resources and leadership roles. We are honored to be hosting such an amazing group of alumni. Thank you all. A couple of housekeeping items. This event will be recorded and will be available on demand in the next couple of days on the alumni website, and I will be posting the link in the chat. Number two, if you would like to reach out to our panelists after the event, I will post their contact information in the chat towards the end of the virtual event as well. And number three, I will go off of screen after introductions and will return toward the end of the event to provide a closing statement. As we highlight the careers of these alumni, I invite students, fellow staff, and faculty to ask questions through the Q&A feature. Now, please help me welcome our guest speakers. Valerie, can you please introduce yourself by stating your name, title, company, your UNC degree, and telling us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me to be here tonight. My name is Valerie Lara Black. I am the principal at Mary Blair Elementary in the Thompson School District in Loveland. I graduated with a degree in Spanish for secondary education, bilingual bicultural endorsement, and an ELD endorsement in 2002. And then I went back and got a master's degree in educational leadership and policy studies in 2005. And I have been an administrator now for close to 20 years, actually. That sounds like a long time. But most recently, I've been at Mary Blair for about 9 years as the principal here. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob.
Hey, everybody. Rob Thorne. I'm the Human Resource Director for Aurora Public Schools. Been with Aurora Public Schools for about just over 3 months now, I think it is, but a pretty extensive background in human resources, specifically in healthcare as well. So have a little bit of background in that. Graduated UNC 1992 with a degree in business administration. I have a master's degree from Lipscomb University in Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you.
Thank you. Amelia?
Hi there, I'm Emilia Estrella, and I have been with JP Morgan Chase now for 11 years. Also, it seems like a long time. I graduated in 2008 from UNC with my degree in business, and then I went on later to get my master's from University of Phoenix. I did that at nighttime, so I did night school. Been in the financial industry just for the 11 years before that. I did quite a few things before, but I think finance is definitely my path. So that's me.
Thank you. Now I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Larson, who will be our moderator this afternoon. Dr. Larson?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending and looking forward to hearing the wisdom from this panelist of folks who are out there, and hopefully they can shed light to, those of you that are quickly going to be on the search process. But I am a faculty member in the College of Business, and I showed up here at UNC in 2005. And my specialty is in human resource management, of all things. So I love this space of organizations. I have a passion for believing that it's really about the people. And before I got into higher ed, I've actually been a manager myself in industry, some of it in manufacturing here in Northern Colorado. And before that, it was in some retail business as well. So anyway, kind of seen both sides of it. I still work with companies along the way as time permits with projects, trying to help them with their HR questions and processes. So anyway, enough about me. You don't need to hear any more about me. We need to get this going. So let's do that. We'll start with our first question. And Valerie, if you'd like to start with sort of your thoughts on this one. So as a hiring manager, what knowledge and abilities or competencies do you look for in recent graduates?
Sure. So coming from the perspective of an elementary school principal, looking for someone who might be coming in for either a teaching position, maybe a specialist job, or even a paraprofessional like an aide position, I can tell you that one of the things I'm looking for is positive attitude. I definitely want individuals to have the skills that they need to be able to do the job, but I will say that 9 times out of 10, we can provide them the coaching and the support that they need to do the specific things that are required in their job. But really, I'm always looking for someone who has the skills to be able to pivot and be flexible. If I've learned anything this year, it is that you cannot expect that your job will look the same from one day to the next. And so having some flexibility and being able to make adjustments on the fly is really important. That being said, if I'm talking about some really critical and concrete skills, it would be knowledge about technology that's appropriate to your job, and knowledge about being able to get answers to things that you don't know. So feeling like you can ask questions and feeling confident in your ability to ask those questions. That's what I would say would be two really concrete things.
Good. Rob, how about your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll add to that. I think some of the things that I look for, especially in new grads or, somebody new coming into the industry, is just kind of that spirit of looking for learning opportunities and those different types of things. Definitely somebody that is going to be coming in and asking those questions and trying to learn as much as possible, I think it's pretty critical from just a new person perspective. I mean, even in myself, only being in this position for 3 months myself, I'm asking questions every day, trying to learn a brand new industry. And here I am 20 years into HR and still trying to figure out how it works and applies. So I think it's important that folks come in with that inquisitive attitude, definitely.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Amelia?
Yeah, to add on to the other comments, one thing that I typically try to look for is teamwork aspects. So what sports or volunteerism or different types of groups have the candidate been involved in? I'd like to see somebody who's definitely active out in their community or within other diversity and inclusion groups. I know that for my corporation in general, we are really, really high right now on diversity and inclusion, especially with the sport. And so I like to see the activity level of my candidate, that team. How can you highlight basically on your resume or even in your interview, how you're a team player and how you can work together in those groups?
Okay, our next question is, one of the challenges that recent graduates that they have is often the idea of years of experience, right? So how do you suggest recent grads reflect their experience that they already do have as they come into the job market? So Rob, let's start with you on this one, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Yeah, sure. So got to get a little creative, I think, sometimes in that perspective. Obviously, as an employer, I'm going to be looking at your resume and I'm going to see that you're a recent graduate. So I'm not going to expect a lot of work experience, I guess you could say, but I'm going to be looking for what are those things that you've done in the community, maybe, some of the organizations that you might have been involved with from a volunteer perspective, maybe, or even taking a look at, maybe some of the favorite classes that you potentially had in the as you were going through and getting your degree, so that we can at least start to have that conversation, so I can kind of hear how you think and how you move through different situations. So not necessarily looking for that experience right away, obviously with a new grad, but just something that, kind of add into that, if that helps.
Okay, thank you. Amelia, how about for you?
For me, I think that's always like the strife of the graduate, right? Is to try to find something that fits in your wheelhouse. We all want to graduate and walk right into the job that we want. So first, I would say is, tempering your expectations and know that you may have to walk into that entry level job just to get that foot in the door, and know that you might have to work that way up, would be really important to note. I know that all throughout, my schooling, people said you're gonna get out there and you're gonna get in the world and you're just gonna get that job that you always wanted. And it was quite different when I left. So one thing is I would open up my mindset for that. But as for not having the experiences, I would take a look at the job roles and responsibilities and take a look at what expectations that role entails, and try to find some commonalities between the experiences that you have, and be able to correlate those during your interview and even on your resume. Resumes are great, especially now for larger corporations. They'll run them through different types of checkers. So making sure that you utilize those roles and responsibilities and how they're listed out, and using those same hot buttons and keywords within your resume to make it correlate with the type of job that you're going for is super important.
Excellent. Valerie, how about for you?
Well, I just learned something. So thank you, Emilia. That's what I'm going to do next time I have to write my resume. That's awesome. You know what? I would agree with that. I would say identifying your strengths is really important and recognizing the fact that you might be a little bit green, but really highlighting that opportunity. And you know, something that has been really impressive to me in the last several years with new candidates has been the fact that they seek me out. So when you are looking to get a job in an elementary school and you want to work in my school or in my district for whatever position that might be, you take the time to find out how to get a hold of me and you write me a personalized email or send me a letter. That tells me that you're taking initiative, and it doesn't matter necessarily how many years of experience you have on your resume, but you're trying to get creative and find ways to get your foot in the door. And that to me shows experience in getting a job and experience in being assertive beyond years of experience in the position.
All right. So as moderator, do I have the license to ad lib here? Because I get this question a lot by students, right? So what do you say to the student if let's say a job that they're interested in is listing whatever that years of experience is, 2 to 3, 3 to 5, right? If the student feels like I don't have any of that, is it best for them to just move on and not even entertain the thought of throwing the application in? Or like you say, get creative and try to somehow come up with the years of experience in some representation? Because they run into that a lot.
I'd like to chime in on that one. So I would say go for it. No interview is a bad interview. And honestly, the more that you can get in front of the same people within that industry and put your name out there and network, you're going to learn something each and every time. And so the more that you can gain that experience and just being honest about the fact that you're green, but you're motivated, that's extremely important. And just the more of those interviews that you're getting through, you can start to find what those companies are looking for and ask them, you know, what can I do to maybe get my foot in the door? What would you recommend for me, and asking for that feedback? I think that's more valuable than anything.
Okay. Rob or Val?
Yeah, I was gonna add into that, you know, obviously LinkedIn is a great tool from a networking perspective. That gives you that opportunity to jump in and start to meet those people in that industry that you might be working for. I think it is important to take a look at that job posting and make sure that it doesn't say required. Sometimes that'll be a kind of an exit strategy for the employer themselves, because they truly are looking for somebody that has a little bit of tenure. But most times it's not required. So that's why I'm saying, you know, I would jump in there as well and just make sure you're making those connections, kind of as to what Valerie was talking about, being creative, not being a stalker or anything like that, but just kind of getting in there and, you know, getting in and starting to meet people and those different kind of things. Another thing to think about is, you know, hey, can I get involved with any of those industry type associations? You know, because that's basically just paying for membership and getting involved typically. So there might be an opportunity there to create that network as well.
You bet.
Yeah. And I would add too, just because you don't get that job that you're applying for, there might be something else
That's right.
that they're looking for and you don't know about it. And so getting yourself out there and putting yourself in front of those interviewers would be a great opportunity.
All right.
I
Thank
would
you.
say that I have hired somebody that is green before, based on the exact thing that Valerie had just mentioned, that they weren't a fit for the role that I was looking for, but I was able to find them a perfect role for them, and they've done really well. So.
Oh, that's a great example. Thank you. Okay, so moving on, from your vantage point, you probably see certain pitfalls. Students experience that, or applicants might experience some sort of a pitfall. Is there anything that you think of when you think about the process that from the other side of the table that people experience? What would you encourage them or advise them to do to avoid just the process that is entailed with pitfalls, if you will? Valerie?
Sure. You know, there's so many different things that could really occur, but possibly, gosh, let me see. Definitely making sure you know what it is that you're applying for, and making sure that your responses to the questions in the interview or the pre-interview screener are appropriate for the job that you're looking for, and that you have clear and complete sentences, phrasing, making sure that you're really being specific and giving examples. So I'd say that's something to avoid when people are not clear when they're applying for jobs. It kind of gives me a feeling that maybe they don't exactly know what it is that they're applying for. And so I would say avoid that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Dr. Larson, I would jump in on that one too as well. And just two things that I've seen, because I was actually in the market for a little while over COVID. I think one of the things that gets a little tedious when you're filling out applications is making sure that you have a cover letter that specifically kind of shows what your background is, because a lot of resumes are going to be coming in, and if they don't necessarily know what your background is or where you came from, or if you're, something like a first generation student or something like that, that shows that initiative, I think that would go a long way in telling your story, even if you haven't had a chance to actually have that initial interview. I think that's important, as well as research. Know the company that you're getting ready to talk to, because as soon as they start going into that question and answer session, they're going to ask you one of my favorite questions, is why do you want to join my organization? So if you're not sure what that organization is, then you're going to be in a pitfall for sure.
Emilia?
I want to piggyback off of what Rob said, because oftentimes I feel that the pitfall is that they send out the same resume to 10 different companies all at once. And quite honestly, you should be revamping your resume for each and every separate job that you're applying for. And with each and every application, you will need a cover letter. And if you get an interview, I would also follow that up with a thank you letter each and every time, which will create quite a bit of work for you. But at the end of the day, it really does pay off. And that type of effort, I think, is not too common anymore. But I think that going that extra mile of that professionalism and showing that you have catered that resume and that cover letter and that thank you letter directly to that company and that interviewer is really important. I think that oftentimes I do see the same resume over and over, and you really need to kind of key that in per the role that you're going for.
Yeah, I think that's important too, because I think you also see a lot of the systems that are going through the applicant tracking systems is what they use, and they're looking for keywords and so forth. And so you can put a little bit more keywords even into that cover letter, and the systems actually look at cover letters too as well. So just a kind of background to know, a little secret there is that the more information that you can give out, the better off you're going to be in coming up to the top of the list.
Mm-hmm.
Makes perfect sense. Good. All right. So where can folks go to try to get comparable salary information for the jobs that they're searching? It's the taboo question that people are afraid to, I guess, address. But what is your thought on salary information, Emilia?
So for me, I work in finance, so money's never taboo. It's what I do all day, every day. So I have no problem asking about money. I can tell you that much. So to me, I think that everybody's, fighting for that next step up in that larger paycheck, and to have like a comparable salary for the amount of work that you put in. And so I would do your research. I would definitely sit down and create a network. So before I started in banking, I went down and I sat with a banker and I said, what do you do here? And, how much do you get paid? And whether they wanted to answer or not, it depends on who you're speaking with. But, I'm pretty personable and I really put myself out there. And I think that the same can go for any industry. You can expand your network and talk about what it's like to be in that industry. And you can open up some pretty big cans of worms and go through that route. And for the most part, people who are in the industry are going to be willing and able to talk about, a salary just kind of like on a common basis, and say, this is what you should be shooting for. And this is in your area, what this would look like. And this is what this entails. So really networking, and even just getting to talk to those industry professionals that you're trying to get into, just being honest and just being out there and just going for it.
I like that. Good. Val, how about for you?
Well, I think in education, there's a couple of resources that I would point to, and it's different, because in education, you're coming in at a certain level, and typically there's a range that you can't break out of until you move yourself over on the scale with education and credits. But what I would say is, I would look at different districts across the state and get an idea for what their salary schedule is, So whether you are graduating from UNC and you want to stay in the district, in Greeley School District in District 6, or you want to move out into DPS, or you want to move back home, I would say go to the websites of all of the different districts and the areas that you're interested in and do your research. There are always resources on the human resources page that show you what their salary schedule is, so you have a good idea of a comparable starting wage for an entry-level position, a new teacher, from different types of districts and different sizes of districts. And that's a good way for you to start and get an idea for where you're going to be when you first enter into a teaching career, or could be a new principal career, could be an instructional coach career.
Good. Rob, how about for you?
Yes, I'm going to approach it a different way too as well. I think, obviously with the school systems, there typically are kind of set ranges, so there's not a whole lot of negotiation that goes on there from that perspective. But I would caution to, a lot of folks want to go out to salary.com and take a look at all those different types of websites where they have different, references, and understand that those ranges that are on there are typically reported by internal employees, and they may not always be accurate. So just be careful from that perspective, because I'm going to always escalate what my salary is just because I think I'm worth that kind of thing. So you have to be careful of how much that information is worthwhile. But I think a lot of times, especially as folks are coming in new, you can always reverse that question as well. And it says, well, can you tell me what the range is for this entry level position? So you're not pigeonholing yourself and saying, I'm coming in too high, when the range is only going to be a certain level. So it's okay to ask the employer as well, hey, what does that range look like for this position? And that helps you to decide too, if you want to continue on.
You bet. You bet. So what is your thoughts on the accuracy? You mentioned salary.com. What about the information? Because Glassdoor reports that out a lot as well. And we know how they gather that, right? If you provide the information, then you can, as an individual, also get information back from Glassdoor. So it's a self-report. So what's been your experience on those salaries that are reported?
So for me, perspective, it's been, you get what you pay for a lot of times. So I think the information that I would even use as an HR director and trying to figure out where to position different positions within my organization, I would have to participate in a survey that would be, here's what I pay my nurses, or here's what I pay, for a custodian type position or something like that. And then that way I could get the information back, and it would actually provide me back with ranges as well. So I think, things like Glassdoor are a little bit more accurate, because they're actually surveying and asking organizations what they actually pay for. And it's usually coming through an HR department. So it has a little bit more validity to it.
Okay, good. Do you either Val or Emilia, do you have any experience specifically like with Glassdoor as a resource?
So I had to recently, over the past couple of years, renegotiate a salary to do a move to a different city. And so that was something that I tried to utilize was Glassdoor. And something that I also utilized was the census information, which luckily we just got done with one of those. So the last ones that I was able to pull up when I was doing my salary move was from 2010. But since we do have a most recent census information that was done in 2020, those should be something that are, a little bit more accurate. So I was having to pull 2010 numbers, then I was having to inflate the numbers due to inflation and over the years, things like that. So I did find some of the Glassdoor salaries to be somewhat comparable, but it really just depends on like what level that you're trying to get into for my industry, because those salaries are always flexible. Whether that's up or down, it really can depend on experience, different things like that. But it kind of can give you around where the company is willing to pay to just perform the job, but just depending on your experience, it could be different. So I wouldn't say that that's necessarily where they have to lie. So if you have some value that you can add to that company, I wouldn't necessarily just say that, that's it and that's all they're going to pay. Salaries can always be, in some industries, not all, negotiated.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, Dr. Larson, one of the other things I would suggest is there's a group called Comp Data is a group that does a lot of that surveying as well. So if they can get a individual access to that, you'll be able to get a lot of industry type information from there as well.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So the next one, it kind of seems to me it's a question where you get to brag about your industry and kind of put the pitch out there in case somebody's wondering what an industry is like. So are there specific requirements that you'd like to highlight within your own industry that would be kind of helpful for fellow bearers to kind of hear? Emilia.
I'm all yay because I love my job. So the funny thing is I'm in finance and I hate numbers. I hate them. I'm very good at them. The cool thing is what I like about my job is building relationships and building trust in people. And so a lot of the finance industry has really shifted from that sales and money mentality over to building relationships and really getting to know somebody and helping them throughout all different stages of their financial life. And so what I look for when it comes to candidates is not necessarily experience, because that's my job. That's my job to teach you how to be great. What I look for is somebody who's extremely motivated, who's great at customer service and extremely nice. I can't teach you those things, that's something that comes naturally. So, my industry at the current moment is really great for someone who's green and doesn't have the experience or even the know-how with numbers. It's totally okay. You don't have to be great with numbers. We teach you and we give you all the systems and the tools and all of that to be great. But my day is not filled with numbers. It's about sitting down with clients and building those relationships and really cultivating that from the beginning. And we teach you that from the ground up. Our training is fantastic and amazing. And I can tell you that's industry wide. It's not just specific to my company itself. It's just been a shift that has happened probably about over the past 5 years in my industry to go to more of a customer centric platform, which is pretty great. And it's honestly really great. Like I said, for people who are graduating and looking to get into that entry level, we're looking for you.
Yeah. Sign me up.
Right.
All right, Val, how about for you? What kind of plug would you say about the career that you have and the work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Emilia in that we are very people-centered. So, in education, it's just always been that way, but even more so now. There's a huge focus now in not just how you teach and what you teach, but really how you build relationships with your community. And that includes your kids and your colleagues. That flexibility that I was talking about earlier really has a ton to do with how effective you will be as a teacher. And I would say not just as a teacher, as a school nurse, as a paraprofessional, as a librarian, being able to flex and move and be creative in your thinking and innovative in your approach. And just talking with a staff member today, taking on leadership activities. So being willing to jump in and take on tasks. I would say as a brand new professional coming into education, the expectation is not that you are a leader, but that you put yourself out there in situations where you could be. You take risks, you ask questions, and you develop a relationship with those around you, including your students and the families, build a network in your community, understanding that what you're doing is serving your community and not just coming in and teaching information to kids, no matter what grade.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. Thank you. Rob, how about for you?
Yeah, so I would say be passionate about the industry that you're going into. I think one of the things that I typically look for as an employer and thing that I love about my job is that the people that I work with are just as excited as I am to be in that industry. And so don't come into it from a standpoint of this is my first step into a job and and treat it as such. Be passionate about it and be ready to kind of jump in all hands on deck like everybody else is saying.
Well, our next question is getting into the interviewing topic, but it does kind of speak to our current times. And that's what tips would you share on how to make the right impression with the virtual interviewing process that is really sort of taken hold? Val.
So as funny as it sounds, I would say choose a good background because it can be distracting. I mean, really thinking about professionalism from the standpoint of We get that you're interviewing from your living room. I totally understand. I did several interviews from my dining room table. I get it. But making sure that the environment that you're in really complements who you are as a person, that you take this seriously, that you have awareness that what you're doing, while it might be in a very different environment, is still important to you in advancing your career. So making sure you're thinking about, what does my background look like? What is my environment? Am I dressed appropriately? Do I have everything that I need in front of me? I'm not searching around for materials. I'm not easily distracted by what's happening around me. That kind of stuff really speaks the volumes to the person that you are in general. You're organized, you're aware, you're professional. That from an interviewing perspective in a virtual world is really important. And being punctual too, making sure you know how to get into the platform, you know what you're doing, you're a little bit early, you have an opportunity to set the camera or whatever you need to do before the interview actually takes place.
Yeah, excellent ones. Rob, what would you advise?
Yeah, so be ready for a virtual interview would be the next thing that I would say is, it's more standard than you think from a standpoint of, now and just going through a lot of these interview processes. Every one of those interviews was a virtual interview until you get to the last and the final stage. So be ready for that. I would also suggest that you understand your environment, what does it look like in the background and so forth, so that you're not distracted there. And I would also practice if I could. So that's one thing that I would manage and try to get through is go through a couple of virtual sessions with some friends. Or some colleagues that maybe have a Zoom, setup or something like that, that you can practice with them, because it is different talking to a screen and then it is to talking to somebody across the desk from you. So if there's an opportunity for you to practice a little bit, that's a great thing to do.
Yeah, I like that. Excellent. Amelia, what would you do?
So I would echo the same thing as the other two. Get a good background, as I have a brick background. I'm in a historic building. Sorry about that. But I would make sure to prep beforehand, like you said, and make sure that you're dressed appropriately, of course. But for me, I think that I've had to do quite a few Zoom interviews over the past few months. And it is really hard to get that same feeling as if you were in person. So really trying to make that personality shine and be yourself as much as possible is really important. Because it is really hard for some reason when we're not in person and we can't see and feel that body language to let ourselves shine through. And I think that putting it, virtually kind of takes away from that human aspect just a little bit more. So just making sure that you can still have yourself shine through, even though it is virtual, is just sticking to that aspect of it. Also, I think that I would just kind of piggyback on what Rob had said earlier about doing your research on the company. Is if you're going to do a Zoom interview, you have the ability to have notes in front of you if you need to. You can have it in the background and still, make sure to do that. But making sure that you do know about that company that you're going to be going for and have that research done and handy if you needed it, but being prepared in that aspect as well.
Excellent. Something that you mentioned, Rob, in terms of maybe the first one or two rounds of the interview process being done virtually, and then it gets to the final, and maybe that's more face-to-face. I would just offer this insight from our standpoint as a university right now of this past year, pandemic times. We have actually made many, if not most of our hires, everything virtually, which is very odd, like for a faculty search, for example. It's very common for them to, get them to be on campus, let them see us, that sort of a thing. And so we've just had to kind of take the risk and kind of change our ways this year. And so it's been kind of weird to hire somebody without them ever coming to us face to face, but we've had some good hires and it's worked well. But that's where things are at, right?
Right. Yeah, I've run into that even as a hiring manager at my previous position in a hospital. We have to be ready as employers to be able to make an offer right away, and that may be right there virtually. Talk to them, hey, what's it going to take to get you on board, and those different kinds of be prepared for that. And one thing that I was going to add too as well, you can always use that background situation to your advantage as well, because you could be looking at their background and they may have a book on their shelf or something like that you can refer to that says, hey, I just finished reading that book. What did you think about it? And so that gives you an opportunity to kind of make that personal relationship go.
Yeah, that's a great technique, a little tip for sure. So everybody gets to a point in the interview process where the organization turns the tables and says, do you have any questions for us, right? So what questions would you recommend one ask during an interview as that process comes to light? Amelia?
I always like when the candidate has questions for me, because that's one of my favorite questions to ask is, what questions do you have for me? And when they don't have questions, it's always a hard stop for me. So I always want to make sure that they do have questions, because they absolutely do. And so don't be shy to ask those things. But the things that I would be asking are, what are your, the common things, like what are your hours, what are your dress code, the different things like that, but more higher level questions, such as, oh goodness, mind blank. So what is your normal day to day look like? Tell me what it is, a normal day in the life of a banker. What are your expectations of your team when it comes to community involvement? Or maybe, how does your team get involved in the community? Because if that's something that I'm asking them, is what are their volunteerism events? What are different things that they do? How are they involved? I think that they should want to know that from me. Like if that somehow was something that I've asked them and that was important to me to know, then they should want to ask the same type of things. So just making sure to kind of put that back onto your interviewer. And also with the roles and responsibilities, I would make sure to go through those individually, not every single question, but and make sure to elaborate on those things that might not be clear or might be pretty broad, and make sure to elaborate further on those items. I think those would be very important to do.
Yeah, good. Val, how about for you?
Yeah, having a really thoughtful question always takes me aback, and it makes me remember that person. And so that's always good. A couple, for example, were, why did you choose to come to this building? Or why did you choose to engage in this profession or take this job? Or, making it personal. I think that's helpful in building those relationships early, rather than waiting until you have the job. You're already starting to build the relationships now. Being thoughtful about, not necessarily instructional practices, but maybe asking some specific questions about what does it look like when you enter into, a literacy block or, different types of instructional blocks, but then also asking questions about collaboration. We can't do this job in isolation. I don't know of any jobs really that are effective in isolation. And so asking good questions about, how does collaboration take place realistically in your organization? I think that's a great question to ask.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Rob, questions come to your mind?
Yeah, so one of my favorite questions really gets to fit and being, fitting into the organization. And that's really talked to me a little bit about what's the culture like, how do you align with your culture and your values inside of the organization, and how does that align with your personal values? That gets to that, that relationship piece as well, that helps them to understand that, you're really truly looking for that organization that fits for you too, as well. It's not just a job, it's something that you feel passionate about from that perspective. I think I would also limit my questions to maybe 2 or 3. And depending on where you're going into, you can probably add more to that as you get further down in the interview process, because they're going to, expect more, back and forth from that perspective. And then also just a quick tip, I think, be prepared that the question that you may ask may trigger them to ask a different question. So be prepared, from that perspective, that they may come back and say, hey, that was an interesting thought. Tell me more about that, and turn it right back on you. So just be ready for that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Very good. So something that jogged in my mind as you were all talking, kind of yours specifically, Val, I like the idea of, tell me why you got into the career. How would you take a question coming from an applicant that would say, what expectations have not been met in your career or that have been disappointed in your career? Would that set you off?
No, I don't think so. I think that's a really honest question. And I think that's important for people to ask. I don't think many individuals ask about that. I think especially as a recent graduate, you have, pie in the sky perspective of what's going to happen when you enter into the job force or the workforce. And I think it's good for you to know the reality of, things are hard sometimes. who knew there was going to be a pandemic and, it didn't work out the way you wanted it to. I think it's important to be realistic with your understanding, but then be prepared for the response that you're going to get. I may not sugarcoat a response like that. I may think you're asking me, I'm going to tell you.
Mhm. Anybody else care to chime in on that sort of thought?
I think that's a really fair question to ask. I think that sometimes that could maybe take it down a different road. Like you guys said, hey, if you ask me the question, I might give you the honest answer. And so if that's something that you truly want to know, and if you're really vetting out an industry and a job, I think that's a great question to ask. I don't think that's a bad question to ask at all. And catching an interviewer off guard like that, which you're going to with that question for sure. I think, I think that would kind of go, oh, okay, let me figure out which way I'm going to go with this. I think that you will get a lot of honest answers out of that, and you will start to hear like some of the good, bad, and ugly if you're trying to get into that industry, and you can make a choice from there if maybe that's the right fit for you, or maybe it's just not the right company culture, but it is important to know.
Yeah, you all know this better than I do, but I see it all the time with the fit issue, right? And it's all about that. And I think those kinds of questions really allow, even early on, even if it's the first interview, it allows the relationship to kind of say, so tell me, what's been sort of the hurdles for you in the career? Because that's kind of what they're searching for, because it isn't the glasses in the sky kind of a thing. Let's get real, for sure.
I think that one of the things that I would make sure to ask though is for the feedback. How can I highlight as a candidate how I could possibly be the best fit for your role, and ask what they're seeking specifically from you as a candidate, and how you can highlight yourself and show them that you maybe are that ideal candidate for them.
Yeah, awesome. Very good. Okay, we're kind of getting close to the end. So any kind of final tips that you would offer to students who are on campus getting ready to walk across the stage here in a couple of weeks with a diploma in hand and launch into a career? Any words of wisdom? Let's start with you, Emilia.
I would start to get out there. I really wish that somebody and start to network with the industry professionals in the industry that you're seeking. I would start to make those connections and make them now. That will help you find that foot in the door, and that industry professional will be able to give you those tips and tricks that you may not have known otherwise, that aren't going to be in those textbooks that you have. Those are something that you learn, on with boots on the ground only. And instead of making those mistakes and learning throughout the process, maybe you can avoid them before they even happen. So I would definitely, expand your network, get yourself out there and find yourself either some sort of mentor or an industry professional who's willing to kind of guide you through that process. And I can tell you that just as there's, two other people on the phone with me here who are willing to give you those tips and tricks. Like we're not the only ones out here, in every industry, you're going to find those people who you can just walk in the door and you can find somebody who's more than willing to share all of that information with you. So, put yourself out there. We've all been there. We've all been through the schooling. We've all done it. And then gotten out in the real world and gotten smacked in the face with the reality. So it is harsh and it is kind of a long road that you're about to go on, but I would just breathe, expand your network, get yourself a mentor, and try to learn some things before you get out.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Val?
Yeah. I would agree with that. I would also look for opportunities to get yourself into situations where you can be of support or have experience in the industry that you're looking to get into. So if that's in education, perhaps you're getting your substitute license and you're coming in and serving as a sub in various different environments. So you have that experience. Maybe you're looking to volunteer in different areas that could support your resume, pad your resume with that information, but really gain that important experience. Talk to other individuals, like Emilia was saying, talk to other individuals that have this experience that you are seeking to get into yourself.
All right, good. Rob, anything?
Yeah, so a couple things there. First off, don't trip when you're going across the stage. That was quite embarrassing. I'm not speaking from experience or anything, but network. That is the most critical thing that you can do. And I think the more that you can ask for exploratory type interviews as well. So, hey, can I find somebody on LinkedIn that is in that industry, and can I reach out to them and just say, hey, do you have time for a cup of coffee, and be willing to pay for that cup of coffee, and talk through, some of that situational, just, hey, what can I do to, improve my chances in that position or something like that will be very helpful. I moved recently from Nashville, where I had lived for 20 plus years, and then moved back to Denver. And so my network was very, very small. And so I used LinkedIn a lot from a standpoint of just trying to meet and greet, fellow HR professionals, and reaching out to former professors, and reaching out to people that are in the industry, or even friends of mine that, could help me to understand, hey, do you know anybody that I can connect with that just ask questions is critical.
Yeah. And I would just real quickly to the whole networking thought, right? That's a great path. I sometimes think we undersell our network with bears. That on LinkedIn, just name dropping that connecting point does wonders, because like, oh, a fellow bear, yeah, call me up. I'll be happy to talk to you. So I think we can always serve that aspect very well. Okay, so we do have a couple of questions in kind of the Q&A, so we'll kind of shift here. These are coming from some who are joining us here tonight. The first one that they've given us is, do you find or have you heard that the transition for graduates can be difficult, or that it's quite drastic? Are you hearing those kinds of stories, if you will, from recent grads? Anyone?
I think the biggest thing you have to be careful of is, leveling your expectations, especially when you're coming out of school, coming out of UNC. I thought I was going to have that perfect job too, and I ended up working in a mailroom kind of situation and working my way up inside of an organization. You have to be ready for that. So I don't know that it's difficult. It's just making sure that you have that right expectation going into it.
I would agree with Rob. I think I had those preconceived notions that I was going to walk right out with my diploma and I was going to get my dream job. And unfortunately, that just wasn't the case. It took me a lot of years to build and get into the industry that I finally found was a fit. I didn't even walk into the industry that I thought that I would. And here I am 11 years later. So it was just a job that I thought was a stepping stone for me. And it turned out to be, definitely a lifelong career. So putting your feelers out there if you maybe don't know what you're going to do going forward. And like Rob said, temper those expectations that you may have to take something entry level. You may have to work a few jobs. I did. You may have to go back for a further career or another education, like add-on and certifications, different things like that. You might have to do that, but being willing to, drop your pride at the door for a minute and go into that entry level job. You might not walk in as a CEO, but you can work your way up that ladder, and it will be worth it.
Val, anything?
I would say you definitely want to pay attention to the level of professionalism that you have to exhibit as a student is different than the level of professionalism that you exhibit as a true professional. So be aware of those things. Ask those questions of your colleagues. When you find a mentor, make sure you're asking those specific questions. What does dress look like? What do hours look like? How is it appropriate to approach, the leader in the organization? What is the appropriate way to ask questions via email? Those kinds of things. It might look different than the relationships that you had as a student. And so really pay attention to that, because that also elevates your standing in an organization.
I like that. Good. All right, a second question. Do you hire or ask questions based on culture fit, or do you also look for culture add? In other words, are you looking behind what the candidate can offer your organization beyond the general skills?
Yes. Yeah, short answer is yes.
Big yes.
Yeah, big yes. I'm always looking for what can an individual bring that we don't already have. You can't be stagnant. It always has to be about growth. And so an organization, just like an individual, can afford to grow and change and innovate in different ways. And so if you have something to offer and we don't already have that, or it might be of value to us, number one, paint that picture for me. show me how your unique skill set or how your value add might contribute to my organization. I might not be able to see that right away.
Rob?
Yeah, I would, Dr. Larson, you're probably going to appreciate this this answer, but if an HR professional is in their industry and they're worth their weight, they're going to be thinking about succession planning. So they're going to be looking at, okay, how do, if this person's coming in, maybe they have the right attitude for working in this department, but can they transition that into another position within the organization? So it kind of goes back to that comment about, hey, you're going to come into the organization and potentially start kind of in one spot, but doesn't necessarily mean you're going to stay there forever. So, I'm always going to be looking for that attitude and that culture fit that's going to, come in and help me look at how can I grow my organization as well.
Okay, good. So one last question. It's on the tip on how do you negotiate salary?
It's a delicate dance.
Right.
Tip for me, I think if you have the opportunity to, some employers don't like it, but if you can put in there, negotiable, that doesn't mean that you're coming in with a preconceived notion as to what you're looking for, especially coming into an entry-level position. What I was doing, particularly when I was going through a job search, was that I would just, I would announce what I was making in my last job, so that at least they understand kind of where I'm coming from. Doesn't necessarily mean I have to stay there, but it gives them an idea or a starting point. It's all about negotiation. So it's all about getting on the dance floor and making sure you're not making everybody mad and, kicking off the dance floor, if that makes sense. So.
How about you, thoughts there, Emilia?
I think that for me, it depends on what stage really that you're in your job role. So as somebody who's entry level, what I would say is, do your research, go through your mentors in your network and make sure that you're getting into a company who would be comparable to the type of compensation that you're seeking. However, once that foot is in the door and you're ready for that development and you're ready for that next step up, that's when really your firepower comes into play. And so documenting those development steps and that progress that you've made, whether it's in a short time or just the strides that you've made over the time and tenure within your job, that's really when you have to kind of start going and making those salary negotiations. I know for me personally, when they offered me a position, that's when I felt like I had an upper hand to then present a full budget of what my expectations were and what my past history was and why I am worth this much. And then we did the dance, and it's okay to walk away. That is one thing that I do want students to know, is that there's always going to be another door open. It is okay to say that's not enough for me if it truly is not. And so be willing to walk away and say, I'm sorry, this is just not maybe a good fit for me, and go after the one that may be a good fit for you, but remembering to temper those expectations that it is an entry level, generally when you are just getting out of school. But once you are in that company and you have provided the value and started to learn and go through that progression of development within your role, that's really when you get the firepower. So don't take that first step in as your be all end all, because it will depend on you and your work ethic from that point on to start negotiating your salary. At least for my industry, I know that there are some industries that they have different caps and you have to have some certain certifications in order to get to those next steps and take those next steps. There's many companies that offer tuition reimbursement services and different certifications that will get you more in your job roles. So take advantage of those and always make sure to work with your higher up, your supervisors and all of that to make those next steps. Don't just do your day-to-day job and just coast through, like work through those development programs and make sure to check in and get feedback so that you're not surprised during an annual review that you only got a little bit of a raise. Like fight for it and make it worthwhile.
Excellent. Well, I think I could carry this on well into the evening. I think we're just getting started, but I'm told that we're going to cut it off here at the hour. So, gosh, I can't thank you all enough on behalf of the university. It's just, I'm so glad Norma reached out to me and asked if I would do this. Heck, I'd do this every day of my job if I could. But anyway, hopefully those of you that have listened in, it's been something that's been of value to you. And I saw in the chat that the bios were provided. And so I think it's easy to reach out to these folks if you'd like to carry on a conversation with them a little bit farther. I'm sure they would be more than happy to do that as a fellow Bear and help you along your path as best they can. So I think that's all I have to say. I don't know, Norma, you're welcome to jump in here and sign off officially if you need to do that. So thank you, though.
Thank you, Dr. Larson. Thank you to all of our panelists and everyone who joined us. I hope that you all took down lots of notes. I was over here writing all of the notes. And one of the things that I'm taking away is know your worth. I think that was it resonated with me. I want to invite everyone joining us to join us next week. We are hosting our last alumni career panel for the spring semester, titled From Scholar to Working Professional. So come connect with fellow Bears who are going to be sharing their experience in their transition from school to a working professional. To all of you, again, thank you for participating. I look forward to staying in touch. And everyone, have a great evening and go Bears.